Check 1, 2.
Okay, welcome everyone to the April 6th meeting of the ZA Community Advisory Committee. I'm Don Mosier, the Vice Chair. We're waiting for Dwight Warden to show up, but in the meantime, let's get started with the roll call. I see our secretary is not here, so Barbara Boswell, can you do double duty and call the roll, please?
We're actually testing our technology and she's participating via Zoom. So she's going to come on and call the roll.
Thank you, Susan.
Hi. Okay, Member Daniels? Here. Member DeCino? Here. Member Jameson? Member Paul?
Yes, present.
Member Lesazade?
Present.
Member Davenport? Member Norris?
Present.
Member Kirschbaum?
Present.
Member Shade?
Present.
Member Colson? Member Ishii?
Here.
Member Oshley?
Here.
Vice Chair Mosier?
Here.
Chair Warden?
Here.
We have a quorum.
All right.
So we're just ready for the pledge. We just did the roll call.
Feel a lot. I've only seen most of you on Zoom. So, wow, we got a great turnout. That's good. All right, let's do the pledge of allegiance. Yeah.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, thank you. Don's taking care of me. Turn my mic on and everything. All righty, so that brings us up to next is public comment. And this is a chance for anybody in the public who wants to make a comment on something that is not on our agenda. If you're in the room, just shoot your hand up or come up to the microphone. I'm not seeing anyone and ask the staff, is there anybody remotely or are we even allowing that at this point?
Our first test is with our board secretary. So currently it's in person public.
Okay, so if you are watching us remotely and you really care about what we're doing, hop in your car, come on down and join us at the meeting. At the moment, we're not able to accommodate hybrid inputs. Okay, the next item on our agenda is a chief executive officer update. So For those of you who don't know, that's Barbara Boswell, who has been the CEO for the Clean Energy Alliance since the beginning. Barbara, take it away.
Thank you, Chair Warden, and welcome Community Advisory Committee. It's nice to see you all in person, and thank you for taking time out of your day to come and join us in our first in-person meeting. So the first item before you, and I apologize, it says item 2, but it's item 1, is the Chief Executive Officer update. We've been very busy with our outreach efforts related to our Escondido and San Marcos launch. We are actually enrolling customers this month. And I did learn through a report that most of the customers are enrolling in the first 9 days of the month. So we've already got many of our customers enrolled and taking service from Clean Energy Alliance. We've had a number of different in-person events and presentations that we've made to the communities over the past couple of months. We have continued to have events coming up and in-person presentations. Many of the presentations are groups that have reached out and asked to have a presentation made. So if anyone's listening and would like a presentation made to your group, feel free to reach out you can go to our website and click on Ask CEA and submit a request, and we'd be happy to set up a presentation. We are planning to be at a couple of Earth Day events coming up. This is Earth Month, so we do track our opt-out rates, and those are represents the number of people who have made the decision not to take service from Clean Energy Alliance. I think the bars are a little misleading. The opt-out rates are actually quite low for where we typically see at this point in time. Escondido was the far left, and we are at just about 1.41% opt-out rate for Escondido. And San Marcos is approximately just over 1.5% opt-out. So overall, aggregated for the two cities is about 1.45%, which means most of the people at this point are choosing to stay with Clean Energy Alliance. It is an automatic enrollment, and customers are automatically enrolled unless they opt out. At the last board meeting, the board did approve an update to the Clean Energy Alliance policy, which affects the Community Advisory Committee. The board did establish term limits or terms related to the Community Advisory Committee chair and vice chair. These terms mirror the terms that were adopted for the board chair and vice chair. The chair and vice chair serve 1-year terms, but can have no more than 2 consecutive terms. But once there's been a break, the chair and vice chair, prior vice chair and vice chair can serve again with no limits to the number of terms served, only the consecutive terms. The board appoints 1 board alternate to serve as the chair, and this Community Advisory Committee appoints one of its members as vice chair. Currently, Dwight is our chair and Dr. Mosier is our vice chair. In addition to the opt-out rates for Escondido and San Marcos, this chart on the left tracks the opt-out activity for the Carlsbad, Del Mar, and Sauna Beach. And you can see that we are fairly steady with our opt-out tracking, and so happy that we're not seeing any significant changes. We currently serve about almost 92% of our eligible customers. We also track the power supply products that customers are enrolled in. All of our customers are automatically enrolled in our Clean Impact Plus, which is 75% carbon free. And this was a choice made by each of our city councils of our member agencies. Customers can then voluntarily choose to opt down to our 50% renewable. That doesn't really sound like an opt down because 50% renewable is still higher than what you would get from SDG&E, or can opt up to 100% renewable. And you can see as of February, we had 449 customers who have opted up to the 100% renewable. And we have 188 customers who have opted down to the Clean Impact 50% renewable. So most customers remain in the power supply product that they're enrolled in. We are actively promoting our Green Impact power supply. It was a focus of our booth of the Spring Fling. And we are have our Green Impacts Champion program and look forward to seeing that number increase as we have more in-person events and are successful in encouraging opt-ups. Another item that was before the board for consideration at their meeting on the 30th was approval of an increase in our line of credit. Clean Energy Alliance does not depend on funding from its member agencies. And so in order to ensure that we have appropriate levels of cash available to meet our funding needs, we do utilize a line of credit from JP Morgan. That previous line of credit had been 15 million. And the proposal to the board, which was approved, was to increase it to 25 million. These funds provide the cash flow needed and also funding for our power procurement related to our expansions. The bank does charge interest on funds we don't use. So it's a line of credit like you might see a line of credit on a house, for example. They make funds available and we may or may not need them or use them. Funds that we do not use is charged what's called an undrawn interest rate. As part of this amendment to our line of credit, that rate actually decreased. It was decreased from 2.15% to 1.25%. The other terms remain the same. The two significant terms relate to repayments. We have a principal payment that's due no later than December 31st of 5 million. And then the full repayment is due January 31st, 2026. And our current cash flow projections and financial projections indicate that we will have sufficient funds available to fund both of those repayment terms. Other notes from the board meeting, one important to this body is the declaring of the vacancy for Escondido on the Community Advisory Committee. The application period will run through April 30th. If you know of anyone who would make a good Community Advisory Committee member, please, and that live or have a business in Escondido, please recommend that they go to our website for the application. The appointment will be made at May 25th at our board meeting, and their first meeting with this group will be the June meeting. Our regular board meeting was canceled for April 27th. Now that we're meeting in person, we will be monitoring the agenda. If the agenda is very light and doesn't have anything time sensitive, we don't want to have our board members driving, a distance for a 15 or 20-minute meeting. And so we will be canceling meetings that don't have anything that's significant or time sensitive. So we are canceling our April meeting. The board approved two agreements. One is our professional services agreement with Repepi Smith. They are the firm that provides all of our communications and marketing outreach, and that was extended through June 30th, 2025, reflective of the great work that they've done to date and also provides our consistency as we move through our expansions over the next year. They also approved an extension with Keys and Fox. Keys and Fox is a legal firm that provides special services with regards to the San Diego Gas and Electric rate proceedings that are held at the Public Utilities Commission. They have the experience and expertise with these types of proceedings. And their contract was extended through June 30th, 2024. We also held a public hearing and added a new rate, electric vehicle high power rate. That rate is for non-residential customers who meet a certain level of electric usage. And we didn't have any with our prior customer base, but with the addition of Escondido and San Marcos, there were customers on that rate. And we wanted to be able to offer service to those customers on that same rate. And the board did approve that, and it was effective on April 1st. Chair, any questions?
Thank you. Excuse me. Let me ask first. Are you going to comment about your situation or you prefer not to?
That'll come up.
Okay. Then let me see. Do we have any members of the committee that have a question? Yes, Paige. Yeah. You need to sit next to Don.
There
He
we go.
knows how to
Thank
do
you.
it.
Okay, I have two questions, Barbara. Can you remind us about term limits for CAC members? I don't remember.
The Community Advisory Committee members actually don't have a term limit.
Okay, all right. Thanks.
I'm sorry, your terms are 3-year terms,
Right.
but there's no limit.
Okay. The other thing on the line of credit that we're looking at that's due in, 3 years or something. Once that's paid off, is CEA going to still need ongoing loans, or do we have enough reserve to cover that?
Yeah, we don't anticipate needing any additional
Okay.
loans.
Thanks.
Thank you. Yes.
Hey, got my mic on. Could you give a little more detail, Barbara, about the electric vehicle high power program, about what that is?
It's a rate that customers who meet certain criteria with regards to the amount of electricity use they have. So they would be very large electric vehicle charging stations. So I believe there's a Tesla charging station, a large one within either Escondido and San Marcos. So it's a very specific use geared to a very specific type of facility.
So they have a different rate structure than the residents, it sounds like, for,
Yeah, SDG actually has several different electric vehicle rates. Most of them are geared toward residential and have different rates during different types of use, and customers can choose from there. This one is specifically non-residential for a certain sized use and has pricing and a structure specific to that use.
thank you.
Any other questions from community? Yes, sir.
So I had just to follow on from the electric vehicles. So will Clean Energy Alliance offer an EV time of use like SDG&E has right now? Because I'm on SDG&E EV time of use. And will Clean Energy Alliance at some point offer that?
So we offer all the rates that SDG&E offers
Okay.
that there are customers enrolled in. So yes.
Thank you.
Not seeing any other, yes, sir.
Not looking
Oh,
very
okay.
far.
Sorry.
Yeah, we look like staff over here, but.
All right, thank you. Just a couple questions. One, and you probably have explained this before, but on the opt-out rates, the denominator is the number of services or customers. It's not the population.
It's the number of eligible accounts.
Okay, thank you. And on the credit line, what's the interest rate if you draw on the credit?
The interest on the used portion is based on the SOFR rate, which replaced LIBOR. And I'm not going to be able to remember what SOFR stands for, but it's about 7% right now.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Deborah.
Yeah, I just had a question on slide 7, and I'm very curious because it's something we're tracking, and I'm just curious how you define that data point. So it has 87 changes, and I'm wondering, are those people who sold their house and moved, or did we actually have a conversation with them and they decided to opt out?
They would be, a customer has to make a choice to opt out. So they would either have to contact the call center, they can go online and opt out. So if they call in, they do have a conversation with the call center reps, and the reps ask why they're opting out, and we'll try to address their concerns. We do track the reasons, and typically the top reason for an opt-out is they don't like being automatically enrolled,
Right.
even though it's less money. Or they have concerns about rates. And to the extent that we can, address those concerns, it may or may not sway. I know the call center actually has had some success in addressing concerns and having someone not opt out when they called initially to opt out. We do try our best to not have a customer opt out.
Because I'm just common sense wise, if you have an N that changes by 87, but there's no other change, something could be somebody sold their house and they just terminated their account.
Right.
correct?
So when
Okay.
someone moves in, they are automatically enrolled.
They
So
automatically go back on. for
the new
same
person
resident.
moving in.
Okay,
And then they get, when there's a new move in, either do a residential because of a sale or an apartment where one tenant moves out, another one moves in, they are automatically enrolled. And then they do receive 2 notices letting them know that they've been enrolled.
okay, that's good.
Thank you. Rick.
Yes, I had a question about the commercial EV charging rate. How does that compare to what SDG&E was charging?
It's a little bit lower per kilowatt hour than SDG&E's rate.
So what was our motivation to do that?
If we didn't offer it, that customer would likely choose to not join Clean Energy Alliance because we didn't offer the rate. We'd have to put them on a
No,
different.
no,
rate.
I mean, what was the motivation for us to give them a better rate than SDG&E was giving them?
One of our goals is to offer savings compared to SDG&E on all of our rates. All of our rates
Thank
offer
you.
a savings.
All right, I'm not seeing any other questions. Let's see if we have any public comment. Is there anybody in the audience that wanted to comment on the executive director's report? I'm not seeing that. Let me quickly just note, some of us, including me, attended that San Marcos Street Fair, and it was pretty fun. And I saw some of the rest of you did too. And it was really fun and quite rewarding to hear. I would say 9 out of 10 San Marcos people who approached the table were very supportive. One person was a bit suspicious, and I think I talked him out of it. But did anybody else who participated in that want to comment? And I want to thank everybody who did. Yes, did you want to say something?
No, just a comment. Here we go. Basically, I also was impressed when we went to, with Barbara, of course, to the San Marcos Elementary School. The huge audience of Hispanic speaking folks were there, and then the translator did a great job. And there was a lot of questions, of course, but interaction was very good.
Yeah, and I think at least this is my perspective, this kind of outreach, particularly done by citizens like us, it really matters. People listen to what we have to say. And when you explain to them the advantages of Clean Energy Alliance, I would say it was near 100%. Oh, that's a good deal. Thank you. All right, let's move along. Our next item then would be update from subcommittees. And we have so far 3 subcommittees that we've created that are working in between our regular full committee meetings. And the first one is local programs. So whomever, if you want to update us on where you are, Rick.
Yes, hi. So at our last meeting, we talked about an initiative that we'd like to bring forward. And Dwight, you kind of shut us down and said it would be on the agenda for this month's meeting.
I'm sorry if I don't doubt I said that, I don't remember it, but if it's not on the agenda specifically, you can share with us right now anything you'd like.
So as a group, we met and we talked about trying to provide solar energy to multifamily units. Historically, multifamily, specifically mobile home parks, are naturally occurring low income housing. And we were hoping to be able to convince the committee to get behind that. Since we had that conversation, Barbara had a vendor come in and talk about a way to finance that, and it seemed like that would work very well with this population. And so we're hoping to maybe tag team with our initiative to bring it to mobile home parks. And maybe use that as a resource.
All right, thank you for that, Rick. Barbara, would you like to comment on that? I'd like to move it forward if we can.
Yeah, I believe he's referring to the program that was proposed and came also before this body, which is a Tesla Participate Energy program to bring solar and battery storage.
Right.
The first focus is residential, but then a very close future phase is multifamily. And so we'll talk to them about seeing how we can accelerate that offering. We're still working on that program, and it has yet to be formally approved, but we recognize that it's important to have the multifamily aspect also.
Yeah, so I was in a mobile home park in Escondido I think it was yesterday, and about 4 of the homes had solar on it themselves. And this particular park had modern wiring. I could see that each of the homes had a new electrical outlet and new gas hookup. It seems like they were getting ready for that type of thing. And so in that case, they might not have good enough credit or something, which is where this program comes into play. So I thought it would fit really, really well.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. And I think keep working on that. And maybe at our next meeting, if you're ready, we can ask the committee here to vote to endorse it as a formal recommendation to the board to include it in that. And if anybody's forgotten, the program they're talking about is a private vendor who basically comes in at their own expense and puts solar panels on your roof and hooks you up. And they do a contract with Clean Energy Alliance. We set a rate for that service. And then at least so far, they're telling us that the rates are very competitive, and it's a way to get the equipment up and operating for people who can't afford to do it or who have poor credit or whatever. So it's exciting. And if we expanded it to mobile homes, that would be really nice. Any questions on program committee or further comments? If not, let's go to outreach to underserved communities. And I'll say a few words on that since I'm helping that group. We are still, or go ahead, Paige, please.
I just want
Save
to
me.
follow up on Rick's a little bit, just to let you know that our team, our subcommittee did look at the 6 most aged CCAs in the state to get their local programs. So we kind of compiled that and we have that that we can use to consider, where we're going forward in the future.
Thank you. Yeah, the underserved community committee, our mission is to try to identify in each of our 6 member cities where those underserved communities are who might have an extra impediment to joining us, or certainly might have an extra impediment to opting up to 100%, to see if we can identify ways to help them do that. So we're collecting information from Sandag and various other sources, trying to get a handle on where are the underserved communities. Paige, maybe you want to comment too on the Oceanside program that we're looking at pretty hard, which is, as I understand, kind of a pilot program that's going forward where there would be money made available to bridge the gap to upgrade people from the standard product to the 100% green. And it's not really all that much money, I think. But Paige, you know more about that than me, why don't you?
Well, Barb and I were on call about this yesterday, so I don't know if it's worth going into it right now, but I'm happy to talk about it anytime. Oh, you want me to? Okay. So I'm with a conservation group called Preserve Calavera, and we have a settlement with North River Farms last fall, in which one of our goals was to offset any greenhouse gas emissions. And so we worked through a long process and ended up, there are no local programs to do that. So they gave us, based on some amount per metric ton of emissions, and we have $4.4 million to use in the city of Oceanside to lower greenhouse gas emissions. We've used it so far for some wetlands restoration. We're putting solar on top of some NGOs buildings in Oceanside. And our earliest conversation was with Barbara to up those Karen Farah customers up to 100% clean energy. Is a very simple thing to do. It doesn't cost much per customer. And at some point in the future, it would be nice. This would be the cities, I guess, figure out how to make people that are building new buildings to make sure all their emissions are dealt with locally. So anyway, that's in a
Thank you,
nutshell.
Paige. Yeah, and the concept makes good sense, and we're just going to be working on the logistics. How do you make it work? Deborah.
I just want to add a couple of things. One of the sort of funders of a program like this would be either a city-based fee that would mitigate construction, would go into a grant sort of thing, and that money could be used to facilitate that gap to get our low-income residents up to the 100%. And the other idea that we were looking at in terms of funding is, and I don't know how the cities would view that, because that would be tied to new construction. But the other idea is we roll out a business program where if you're a business, you can be part of this 100% clean energy. You get a big logo that can go on your door. And as part of that, you pay a fee. That fee funds the grant. That grant is what funds the gap. We don't know the complexities about how you fill the gap in the payment system, from a granting program, but we've got lots of ideas along that way so that our underserved communities can be part of all of our cities' climate action goals and really be a participant in that. We feel like this is a way that, we could win on a couple of fronts, get more businesses involved and things like that. So still having early conversations about it, but just ideas.
Thank you, Deborah. It's an exciting idea. Anybody have a question? Yes.
So I just wanted to share a resource. I love this idea. I'm on the local program subcommittee, and Clean Power San Francisco is the CCA up there. They actually have a program called Super Green Saver, which does exactly what we're talking about. So it gives 100% energy and 20% monthly bill savings to disadvantaged communities. So there might be an opportunity to kind of coordinate with them to figure out how they rolled that out or, but I just wanted to share that.
What's the name of that again?
It's through Clean Power SF and it's called Super Green Saver. It's just right on their website.
All right, thank you very
Chair.
much.
Chair, I can give a little
Yes.
more information about
Please.
that program. So the PUC has approved a program called the Disadvantaged Communities Green Tariff. And through that program, load-serving entities such as ourselves who have communities that are designated in the Cal Enviro screen as disadvantaged can apply by filing an advice letter to establish such a program. And they're given an allocation in terms of kilowatts or megawatts for a program. Then if approved, the CCA creates the program and offers it to those that live within that community. And it's not just income-based, it's also air quality. There's different criteria that it results in it being designated as disadvantaged community. And then those customers that are qualify, that the entity can either have the customer sign up or they can be automatically enrolled. And then in addition to receiving the 100% renewable at the base product rate, they get an additional 20% discount, which is funded through public purpose funds that made available through the PUC. The last time I looked, we don't have any areas within our territory designated as a disadvantaged community under the Cal Enviro screen 4.0, I think is what they're using now. And SDG&E never did implement that program. I know San Diego Community Power requested that the PUC allocate that program that was approved for SDG&E that they never implemented to SDCP for within their territory. And they're in the process of, it takes several years. It's a great program. They also, the renewable energy facility where the energy comes from needs to be from within a disadvantaged community as well. So Clean Power Alliance has a program, Clean Power San Francisco that you mentioned. There are some within the Cal Choice group that are working on their program. So it's a great program though.
Thank you for that, Barbara. That's good information and our community or our committee will be digesting that. Any final questions on that subcommittee, underserved communities? Yes, sir.
Barbara, can you talk a little bit more about the definition for disadvantaged community and what the CPUC is using for criteria for that program?
Yeah, they use a Cal Enviro screen 4.0, which is I don't know what agency has created it, but they look at income levels. They also look at maybe. Oh, there we go. Yeah. So this is Cody Hooven. She's with Lupa Affairs and she's working with Clean Energy Alliance to research the grants, and we have a report back to the grants, but this is a snapshot of the Cal Enviro screen 4.0 for our community, and the different colors on the map represent the ratings within the Cal Enviro screen. And I don't believe we don't have any area within our.
Ye-
The little, I wish I could zoom in for you, but the little red spot on the top is pretty near where we are now. So we'd have to zoom in to look more specifically, but Oceanside has a little bit. And then basically you're looking for red and maybe orange depending on the level. So you could see Escondido.
Right. I was going to say, I know that we do have service areas because I know there are in Escondido, and then on the map, I can see Oceanside too. So I know we do.
For programs, though, the red areas are going to be your best bet, but there's always a little bit of difference for each program.
Maybe we need to do some lobbying with the map drawers if there are some areas
Yeah.
that we have that
Okay.
could be red.
Criteria.
I have a follow-up question. So is the CPUC's use of this criteria, is that by law, or is that something they have flexibility on?
That's how what the program, the Disadvantaged Communities Green Tariff Program was designed around,
Right.
is to target those customers that are within the designated disadvantage through the Callan Virus Green 4.0.
Okay, thank you.
All right, good discussion. Yes, Deborah.
Our committee has one other sort of general question. We're really concerned about our outreach and whether we have all of the languages involved in the printed material and the materials that you're doing at the, the local events and if it's not, do we have like videos that have multiple different languages? And we were concerned about that. We don't know the answer to that. How far we are on that.
After we spoke to all of our cities, asking them what languages they wanted our communications in, and the only second language that has been requested is Spanish. And so we do have materials that are in English, Spanish. We have flyers that are English one side, Spanish on the other side. And then, but our website can be translated into basically any language.
Yes, sir.
Just on a sidebar, what you said that we need to lobby with the people that do the map. On my previous job with the city, we also had this challenge that they called low income development, but we never qualified. And my thing was to state, which they always look at me and says, who the heck is this guy telling us what to do? But basically, the low income in San Diego is not the same as low income in Mojave Desert. You need to have a really localized things and not just have a one size fit all. So that's what one day maybe we can lobby when we have time and suggest that to them. Thank you.
Good point. Well, I think we have the ability, hopefully, to jump onto an existing program, which is going to be relatively easy if we can qualify. And if not, we can create our own program. There's no prohibition why we can't invent our own. That's just a bit more complicated. So this is a work in process. Anybody else? I'm not seeing any. Let's go to the EV committee report. Do you want to say something? Go ahead.
Yeah, I had a request to speak. Yeah, I just had a comment about outreach and I just wondered, is there any coordination going on with local school districts? Because like signage, especially outside of schools, there's lots of parents sitting in their cars and so that's all. I just wanted to just make that
Very
comment.
good question. Let's ask Barbara if she knows anything about that.
We've done a number of different events at San Marcos Elementary School, which is in a lower income area, and spoken with the residents there. We had a booth at their food pantry, food handout, and then had as the committee member mentioned, we had a presentation that had an interpreter that interpreted the presentation and then helped with asking questions. We haven't had any other specifically public outreach to other schools. We were invited. We had been invited there.
I was just like signage, for just everybody. How like when somebody's getting solar on their house and there's a sign out front that says, hey, we're getting solar, just something more like that, more in general for everybody, so that people are like, when they get the notices that, we're up and running, maybe they're more likely to go to 100%.
That's good.
So, yeah, I mean, that's just,
We do have,
as opposed to.
yeah, we do have the window clings,
Mhm.
but they're not signs, but yeah, the signs is an idea.
Good thought. Thank you. Yes, Deborah.
Since I don't know if you know, if I'm a school board member and I'm involved really at the state and regional level here in San Diego. And one of the reasons why I got involved in this was to get the schools to get the little banner out front that says I'm 100% clean energy. And I think that's a program we really need to launch, especially now that we've got more cities. Because that just having that logo out front, I'm a 100% clean energy school is great for parents of young kids and especially some of our underserved communities that may or may not be seeing it in their day-to-day movement. So I would be willing to get another committee, but I think that's a great idea. And I know we've been talking about it a little bit.
All right. Thank you guys for that. Seed has been planted. All right, let's talk electric vehicles. Anybody want to give us an update on the electric vehicle subcommittee? Sure.
You can go, yes.
Okay, so we had a quick meeting last month and first we saw all of the information on the CEA website about EVs. So that is really awesome, a great resource for consumers that are going on the CEA website. What we had talked about and brainstormed about is, a lot of people don't really know about all of the benefits of having an EV. Would it be possible when we do community outreach events to have some information about EVs while we're talking to residents? So we wanted to kind of put that out there. And the other thing that we talked about was researching possible grant opportunities for installing EV infrastructure in our member cities. We didn't dive too deep in that because I know Cody's going to be talking about that a lot today. So that's kind of our next priority.
All right, thank you for that. Anybody have a question or want to comment? Yes, sir.
So a couple more things. A lot of the grants, the funding that's available out there is achievable. I think each city, or we can go after it collectively. I don't know how that would work. But if we go looking at the cities to be able to install electric vehicle infrastructure, I think we need to work with probably the planning department in each city and get a member or their sustainability coordinator in each city. I checked with San Marcos, and I have a list of city-owned property where we could possibly install electric vehicle infrastructure, as well as some private big stores or wherever, right off the highway. That's usually where, and there's a lot of grant funding out there. And I think it's the last bullet point on the agenda. It talks about, should we spend money on a grant writer? Yes, yes, yes. They are worth their weight in gold. They can really bring in a lot of, and it's not just for, the EV infrastructure. It could be for any of the topics that we talked about here today. So I think it's important to get each city to be able to identify locations for the EV charging.
Thank you. And I suspect Barbara's going to talk to us more about this in the next agenda item, which is how to chase down the money. Anything else on EVs that anybody wanted to say? Not seeing any. Let's see if we had any public comment. Did anybody in the public want to comment on any of these subcommittee reports? I'm not seeing any, so let's move on to the next item, and that is presentation and discussion regarding the Inflation Reduction Act and other grant opportunities for Clean Energy Alliance programs. Is that going to be you, Cody, or is that Barbara?
Chair, I can introduce.
Please.
This item is before the committee for information and feedback at a request of the committee that we bring more information to this committee about potential grant funding and opportunities. We have engaged Cody Hooven from Lupa Affairs to assist with that. She's met with a couple of the subcommittees. I'm not sure if she met with all of them, but I know that she's spoken to a few and has done some research on the various funding opportunities and brings this report back to the committee for your consideration. So Cody, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And nice to see many of you. I know most of you, but nice to see you again in person in real life, and nice to meet those of you that I haven't met before. I'm now started my own consulting business and working with folks that I think are doing really good things for communities. So happy to be here. I'm going to start also by saying I'm not a grant expert. I'm not a grant writer either, but I support your opinions that they are worth their weight in gold or in money. So I was asked to do a summary of the grants and the funding that's out there. There was a lot of buzz about the federal funding coming out. So I wanted to just do a quick summary of what is out there and talk about some ideas of how it's accessible and what are some of the loose parameters. So the main sources of funding are a lot of acronyms, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and then also the IRA, as you've heard probably, which is the Inflation Reduction Act. There's also, of course, pre-existing state and federal funding grant programs that might just be getting an additional infusion of funds, or they may be the vehicle for which the IIJA or IRA money will be flowing through. So already, if you're confused, it's appropriate. There's also some key parameters, the Justice 40 initiative for the federal funding. You all were just touching on this, but requires at least 40% of federal investments to be delivered benefits to disadvantaged communities. I have that map. We could talk about it again when it comes up. And then there's often similar requirements for California funding and also for CPUC programs as well as Barbara just mentioned. And there's a lot of talk about workforce funding and initiatives as well. So they really trying to thread a whole lot of things into these funding requirements. So this is tinier than I thought it would be here, but the IIJ funding, you could see the tiny breakdown there, but a lot of money over 5 years. A lot of it is going to transportation projects. So a lot of transportation programs, existing programs, essentially, I guess my point here is not coming directly to CCAs or local governments. It's through big state programs and things like that, and transit funding. And a lot of it, more than a significant chunk, is going to Caltrans. There's also in the IRA, there's another breakdown here. So a lot of this funding, not all of it, but a lot of it is direct to consumer funding. I'll talk a little bit more about incentives that you'll see coming to consumers. And I think one way that CEA is already being helpful and can continue to be, and the member agencies, is really making sure the residents and businesses are informed of what's available, because it definitely can be confusing and there's a lot of new, really great opportunities for consumers. A little funny here, but I list all the fundings there, but there's a lot of clean energy financing, housing tax incentives, clean manufacturing. So some you'll see more investments in large scale renewables because they're also seeing tax incentives there. Clean vehicles are definitely all over the place. And then some funds to grant programs to local entities and private entities as well. So digging a little deeper here in the local government's piece, so there'll be direct funding from different federal agencies, so the EPA or Department of Energy, and that will come in the form of building code assistance, tax credits, and environmental and climate justice block grants, which are essentially allocations that go to local governments, and then they have some broad discretion on pre-existing programs that they've defined. Should be benefiting. You hear them a lot as community development block grants, those types of things. And then businesses and individuals, a lot of funding available to streamline permitting, to do education for consumers, those types of things. And a lot of desire to see collaboration. So IRA talks a lot about seeking regional impacts, tribal involvement, and EJ's environmental justice impacts. And so you probably see that theme. I stole this graphic from another CCA and I really liked it. But it just shows from the consumer perspective what you can expect to see, or what consumers can expect to see in different incentives that are much more meaningful to them in their homes or wherever they live. And it's a pretty cool array of things that you might be doing to your home anyway. I have the summary on the next slide in dollars. So there's a lot of federal tax credits available now that have either continued or expanded for things like water heaters, space heating, of course, rooftop solar, and now battery storage, as well as seeing incentives, electric panel upgrades, which is really nice, because folks often forget that that's required as well to do solar at home. And then electric cars, the incentives have changed a little bit, but are still there. And then this column for state rebates, a lot of those are coming in 2024. But they'll be, where you see dollar amounts, they'll be supplementing the federal tax credits. So this is really great for consumers, and getting the word out as much as possible, I think, is really fantastic to make sure folks are taking advantage of all of these things. And then, of course, there's the California state budget. Since I actually put this slide together, they've cut their budget a little bit, so numbers are not quite accurate anymore, but existing either programs that they're infusing with funding, or adding additional programs. One that you may have heard, especially the folks that work closely with cities or in cities, is the Clean California Local Grant Program. So Caltrans has that program in cities. And municipalities have been applying for that to do. It's a little bit of fuzzy description. It says to beautify public spaces. So you'll see some parks and right-of-ways and those types of things, or right-of-ways turned into parks and that type of stuff. So not a ton of clean energy money there, but kind of more of the transit side of things. And again, another projects must be partially or fully in underserved communities. So I thought I would show this map in discussion of grants, although it seemed appropriate earlier. I just pulled this from the 4.0 version of Cal EnviroScreen. And for those that aren't familiar, this is the state's determination of what is a disadvantaged community. Federal dollars might use a slightly different criteria. To Mo's point, it's always room to argue what your own community feels is a community in need. And I know the colors are a little hard to see, but anything basically orange and above typically is where funding will go. So it's either 40%, the top 40% disadvantaged communities or above, and sometimes you see 25. I don't remember what the green tariff is, top 40, yeah. Anyway, it would be the orange boxes, which looks a little bit Escondido, and then Oceanside, or orange and above, so orange and red essentially. This is the latest version, so the earlier versions I don't think had these communities in them. And on the website, you could, if you're into this type of stuff, you can look at their map and dig really deep. You can drill down to an address and pull down the data as well. There's also some talk of public EV infrastructures. This is national funding that's flowing through SANDAG. Or you're all familiar with it, the San Diego Association of Governments, who does a lot of regional transportation planning. So they're doing corridor EV charging installations. So they'll be issuing RFPs or some sort of solicitation, and are typically looking for private charging companies to install banks of chargers in corridors so people can start to travel and use more comfortably using EVs. And so these are the areas, there's 4 rounds, and there's San Diego areas are planned in rounds 1 and 4. And so again, the maps look smaller than I thought they did, but hopefully be available to you later and you can look it up. But those are the corridors that they're planning for our region. And then so the last slide, we really just wanted to talk about kind of some of the challenges of grant funding. You all really touched on a lot of this and know as much as I do about this of, you know, you really, for EV infrastructure, which I hear a lot of interest from this group, you need land use authority in order to install those chargers. So that will be a partnership with other member agencies, the cities that are part of your organization. All of them talk about collaboration. They love to see regional impacts and collaboration. So the more you are collaborative, the better. Funding is slower than you would think. So when this funding first came out, it felt like there was a frenzy of get it now, and it's really taking its time. And then just, of course, the limited capacity of CEA as a standalone agency because they don't have land use authority and just limited staffing capacity. So the opportunities are working with your cities, your member cities, and your communities, and you all who represent those organizations. And I listed some member agencies here and community agencies like the SANDAG EV team, et cetera. Your different staff in your different cities all sit on other collaborative groups. So really just making sure you're in contact with them to let them know your interests and priorities and syncing up that way, I think will be really helpful. And using CEA as a partner. I mean, the mission and goals of CEA is really aligned with all of this funding. So there's a lot of opportunity there. And I think the last thing we wanted to do is leave it up to you all to discuss any other areas of interest so we can kind of take notes and keep our eyes open. And I heard some already and took some notes already, but we hear more. And Barb, I don't know if you want to add anything else.
Thank you, Cody. Barbara, did you want to comment before we see about questions?
I do have that answer in terms of who the DAC Green Tariff Program is targeted to. And it's the homeowners must live in one of the top 25% most disadvantaged communities statewide, where the census tracks in the highest 5% of Cal EnviroScreen pollution burden. So in looking at the map and the colors, I don't think we had any that were in the top 25% most disadvantaged communities in the state. So that was my determination and seeing if we had any disadvantage. It also, you need a little bit of size to make the program be able to operate effectively, but we can certainly dig further into that and see if there's any at all possibility of having any areas that qualify for that program.
All right, thank you, Barbara. And for those of us on the dais here, before questions, This presentation, I believe, was sent to all of us, so you don't have to take notes on it. Don, did you have a question or comment?
I had a comment. First, the California Energy Commission issued an RFP for charging infrastructure yesterday. And all cities here would be eligible for that support. I did want to mention that I have experience writing a grant to the California Energy Commission, which I did for the Del Mar Civic Center for solar system and battery storage. And in my previous career as a scientist, I was funded by grants. And so I probably wrote grants for 50 years before I wrote the grant to the California Energy Commission. For about $400,000, it was a huge grant with 17 work products over 3 years. And all we were doing is installing solar and battery storage. But part of it was outreach to disadvantaged communities. So we had to collect data for performance of that system and then share it with the communities, which we did with a consultant. So I expect that the same kind of conditions might accompany current grants from the CEC. So it's an interesting way to sort of share information and get some credit for reaching out to disadvantaged communities, even though you're based in a non-disadvantaged community like Del Mar. But I fully support the later issue of getting a grant writer, because even though I was really experienced and I got help from people who had written grants to the CEC, this was a full-time effort for almost a month to get this grant ready. So I don't want anybody to trivialize the issue of going after these funds, whether they're federal or state, without a significant investment in time and money.
Thank you, Don. Deborah.
I have a question on the funding to consumers, which I think is slide 7. I guess I'm just not clear on what they all mean. And one of my biggest questions is home energy reduction. And I guess my side question is, are all of these available on our website to our consumers so they understand all these rebates are available? I don't know if they are or not. But then home energy reduction, what does that mean? Your bill is less than next month, the previous month, or is there some structural change to the home?
Yeah, I think there's structural changes, energy efficiency upgrades to your home if you do new
Like
windows,
windows,
shutters,
okay.
those types of things.
So it's just a big broad category.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay.
Other questions?
I
Don,
just
did you have
wanted
something?
to comment with the home energy upgrades, you get a tax credit. I've already invested getting new doors, patio doors, and you get a $400 to $500 credit for each door you put in, up to 2 doors. After that, you're on your own.
All right. Any other questions or comments on this topic? Yes, sir.
Cody, great presentation. Thank you. I apologize if I asked this question, maybe you've already talked about it. Is all these fundings are all being distributed, started, or any of them is not, it's in the queue yet? So basically, that's my first question. And
Both is the answer. So there's funding streams that exist and they're just being infused with some funding, and there's new programs in development. You're seeing RFPs or solicitations coming out
I see.
now and probably for the next year or so.
okay. And any of those are going to applicable to the retroactive, if the project is already done and then they didn't know about it, they can go back and say, oops, we would like to be included?
I don't know. That's a good question. I've never seen that in grants before. Sometimes you could, if you're applying for a new project, you could include a little bit that's been done.
Mhm.
I've never seen it completely retroactive, but I don't know. I'm happy to look
Okay.
around.
Thank you.
One more comment.
Yeah, Don.
There's one more incentive that I just learned about yesterday, and that is the California Air Resources Board, CARB, will have $1,000 rebate for new e-bikes if you meet the right income qualifications. And that was supposed to be rolled out soon. I think the current date is July 1st rollout, but if you want to buy an e-bike, maybe you should wait till July.
Any other questions or
Yes, I have.
comments? Yes.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Cody. I just had a real specific question about this slide 7, the state rebates, expected in 2024. Most of those are for next year. Is that like January 1, 2024? Or is that like there, you don't know? Okay.
I don't know. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm happy to look into that, but I don't know.
And then I had one more question about the NEVI funding. You said that that's kind of all funneling through SANDAG.
Yeah.
So would there be any opportunity for local agencies to apply for NEVI funding, or is this all through the larger agency?
When the solicitation comes out, we can look at it and see who they're making eligible. But when I talked to their staff, they said we're expecting private charging companies to be the ones to be successful in getting the contracts and installing, because they're expecting kind of big banks of chargers for
Okay.
like public off the 15 and all the different corridors, chargers off of those sites. They weren't expecting a local government to want to do one of those, but
Right.
we could look at the details when it comes out.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
This is actually a question for Barbara. So there's a lot of funding activity, especially around EV charging infrastructure. How does that, is that one reason why we have the high power EV rate in anticipation of these larger? Because I see some of this funding going for charging like at, places where people are parking rides and other things like that.
Yeah. In the instance of the electric vehicle high power rate we just added, that was in response to anticipation of serving a new customer and through the enrollments of San Marcos and Escondido that is on that rate that we didn't currently have on our rate schedule. But certainly would set us up to be able to serve any future facilities that meet those qualifications, and we would be ready to serve them.
And those would be eligible customers, even if the chargers are owned by third parties?
The rate does not have doesn't speak to who owns the chargers, only the amount of electric usage from the facility.
But they would be eligible in terms of being a Clean Energy Alliance customer.
So if they're buying their energy for the chargers from Clean Energy Alliance and they have the amount of energy usage at that facility, then they would qualify. They could qualify, and non-residential. So they'd have to meet all of the requirements so we follow SDG&E's criteria. We don't create our own criteria. But if they meet all of the criteria, they could be served on that rate.
Yeah, I think my question's more about, will they be Clean Energy Alliance customers?
It depends
Oh.
if they opt out, or are they a direct access? Or so, I mean, if they're within our territory and they are not a company that has a direct access contract, which means they've previously gotten approval through the PUC to go out and contract from another energy supplier. It's possible that a facility like that could. For example, most McDonald's restaurants are served through direct access because their corporate has a direct access contract with an energy supplier. So most of those don't take their energy, maybe delivered by SDG&E, but they're not up for the commodity or the generation. They're not customers. So that's why I say it depends.
All right, thank you.
Anything else? Yes, sir.
So you mentioned EV charging companies owning the chargers. Is that a requirement, or could anybody, in other words, could the city own those chargers, get the rate, and then profit off of that to install more and then qualify as well for low carbon fuel standard under CARB?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. The NEVI program specifically is for these banks of chargers on transit corridors where freeways, right? But there's other types of funding that will be available, I believe, for like if a city wants to install in city hall chargers or, public spaces, there's different fundings. This one in particular was for corridor charging. So And I haven't seen the actual solicitation come out yet, but when I talked to their
Okay.
staff, they were anticipating it to be private companies that would install these.
Looking at that 1578, coming up 15 through Escondido, the North County Fair, that would be nice.
Mhm.
Or somewhere along the 78 with Escondido, San Marcos, Vista,
Mhm.
Oceanside. If we can get a couple of sweet spots in there, right off the highway. The college in San Marcos is really
Mhm.
attractive, so.
It's really hard to see, but you could see the 78.
I
Yeah.
see that.
Yeah. Mhm.
So if we could own those and profit off them,
Mhm.
and then take that money and reinvest for more chargers,
Mhm.
and then get reimbursed from CARB for the energy that's being used under the EV rate. So it'd be nice to package that all in there,
Mhm.
but we need to get somebody that can coordinate all that. Each city,
You might be on the grant writing team.
I know.
All right, good thinking. He's on a roll. All right, thank you very much, Cody. Oh, I'm sorry, Paige.
In looking over the other CCAs recently, it seems like they take advantage of a lot of these state and federal programs and put them on their website. And I assume we will do the same because it looks like it's our own program, whether it is or not. But anyway, it's just not clear to me, Cody, how much we can expect to trickle down to CEA without doing some specific grant applications. Is that the take?
A little bit, and also knowing specifically what you want to do, because there's a lot of grants either in the making or coming. And so to just say what's available is difficult to do a synthesis of all of that. So it's helpful to know what are the things that we want to do, and then we can go look for money to fit those needs. And I do believe there's some information on the website, so it should be pretty helpful to consumers. But if there's more to add, please send it in.
So that table that you showed us, that's national rebates for all those things that were listed.
Right.
So we can just, whenever that money becomes available, we can advertise it on our website.
Yeah, the rebates and those types of
Okay.
things. A lot of those are available now. Mhm.
All right, one question for me. Are some of these grants, do they require a local match, or are these all 100%? If you get in the door, you get everything?
Also varies across the board. So some do, some don't.
Okay, we'll leave it at that. Yes, sir.
Yeah, just to add on to the idea of having cities buy infrastructure, it seems like this is something that CEA itself could contract people to build the infrastructure for selling more electricity and making money for the CEA, which could then trickle down to the cities and the different people in the entity. So that seems like a good opportunity for us as well.
Barbara, did you want to comment?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. One of the challenges is we don't own any property to put those chargers on. So we would have to have a lease agreement, not that it's insurmountable. But so we would maybe look for a partner. Maybe you were talking about, you've identified city-owned properties. So, we may be able to partner and, a city may say, we want chargers here. We don't want to go through the trouble of installing them or pursuing the money. And so we'll partner with you. We'll let you use the land and you can put your chargers on.
All right, let me see. Is there any public comment? Anybody in the public that wanted to comment on this item? Yes, ma'am. Please come up to the microphone if you would. Yeah, we ask that you go on the microphone. That way we get you recorded and make sure everybody hears you. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. Thank you to the board. This is our Community Advisory Council, correct?
Correct.
And to Chair Boswell. My name is Sonia Robinson. So I'm a program manager at the Protect Our Communities Foundation. I'm also the chair of the Environmental and Climate Justice Committee for the North San Diego County NAACP. And so I have a few questions. And before I ask my question, I'm just going to give a little background. And Cody can contest to this. I was one of the original community organizers and advocates for our CCAs throughout our county, even before we had one. So I just want to, give a little background to let you know that I'm familiar with the program, and I been very supportive of the program. So local programs from a Protect Our Communities Foundation perspective, which is a nonprofit. we are very strong advocates for local generated power, and that is the model that our CCA should be. So my question is do we have either a roadmap or a plan and how we're going to roll out local generated power such as like rooftop solar and our DERs? It's one question. Another question I have is if we have anything specifically related to the outreach for underserved communities. I've given forms on this topic and as well as others, as I'm really closely related to the need for energy equity for the communities that need it the most to relieve energy burden. And then I have so many, but I'm just going to ask one other, is I know right now the national NACP is looking at the clean school bus rebates that are through the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act. And I know this is something as a public agency that you guys could probably also include in your program. And just curious if that would be something that you consider as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'll see if we can get some answers to your questions. I'll go first and let Barbara correct me, everything I goof up. In terms of, do we have programs for local energy projects? Not yet, but it's a high on our priority list as something to do. We're first, since we're still new, building our reserves from our revenues. But as soon as we do that, then we're going to have money for local projects. And that's one of the functions of this advisory group, is to make recommendations to the board on where to spend that money and what programs to do. In terms of second question, I've already forgotten what it was.
It was related to the outreach.
Outreach. Yes, we are working on that as well. We have some programs, but we're always interested in more. The school bus program, I'll let Barbara answer all three if she would care to.
Thank you, Chair Warden. We don't currently, as you mentioned, have any board authorized programs that are funded through Clean Energy Alliance. We do have programs that are offered through partnerships. An example is our partnership with Ohm Connect, whereby customers can go on and get a low-cost smart thermostat or smart plug and receive rewards or incentives for reducing and managing their energy and reducing energy during peak times. The board has authorized us to move forward with working with the group, the Tesla Participate Energy Group, which would bring, if the board approves the final program, we would offer solar and battery storage to consumers residential without a credit application. So it would open up that those types of facilities to those who might not otherwise qualify because of challenges with credit applications. We also have a net energy metering program that supports rooftop solar. And we have our rates when a consumer is using our electricity is a little bit less than SDG&E. And if the system generates more electricity than the customer uses during their 12-month relevant period, we do provide the customer a net surplus compensation of 6 cents per kilowatt hour, which in most months over the past several years has been higher than SDG&E. The last couple of months, we've been a little bit lower. It's because of the market and the way SDG&E creates their surplus compensation. So we do have some programs in place. We have some that we're working on. And then we, of course, our joint powers agreement does identify that we set a priority for locally generated energy to the extent it's available and cost effective for us. It's not you have to take into account cost as well.
Thank you very much, Barbara. Yes,
Thank you.
did you want to say something else?
There was just a few other questions as follow-up to the responses. And one was, I'm curious at what that reserves, because I understand the revenue reserves is important, but just want to know what that budget is. And also if there's for the PUC has a self-generated program that will provide batteries. And you guys may be familiar with that and not sure if you guys are going to take that. And as well as our CAC, what is our role? Is the CAC help with decision-making with the board is probably my last question.
Quick response with regard to batteries. We are collecting ideas on good programs, and Barbara ticked off the ones we have so far, but that's on our list. In terms of the role of this group, the CAC, we are strictly advisory to the Board of Directors, and the Board of Directors appoints 2 representatives from each of the member cities to sit on this group. And I think they take our recommendations pretty seriously, but ultimately they're the decision makers, not us.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Chair Warden. I just wanted to remind the group that we're on item 3, which is a presentation and discussion of the Inflation Reduction Act and other grant opportunities for CEA. So if we can just kind of stick to that discussion right now, so we comply with the Brown Act, that'd be awesome.
All right, thank you. That was a very gentle way to say we're wandering, including the chair. Is there anybody else in the public that wanted to comment before we leave this item? All right, let's thank you. Cody, did you want to make any closing comments?
Very much.
All right, well, we normally try to end these meetings at 3:30, but we all invested so much time in driving up here. I'm hoping we're all willing to stay a bit later if needed to do justice to our agenda. So the next item is our proposed budget overview and input for Clean Energy Alliance Board consideration. So I assume this is Barbara who's up there with the finger dexterity machine.
On my microphone. The item before you at this point in time is to seek input to take into consideration in development of the fiscal year 23-24 budget. Our fiscal year does run from July 1st through June 30th of each year. At the Clean Energy Alliance Board meeting this past on the 30th of March, the board did adopt the following as priorities in development of the budget, and they are in no particular order. Financial stability, which is defined as expenditures should be within the estimated revenues. So we want to present a balanced budget. It should include funding the minimum 5% contribution to reserves per our adopted policy. We should budget the needed resources to meet all of our regulatory compliance requirements. We also need to meet our credit covenants. So along with paying interest to JP Morgan, they have certain requirements of us to maintain our financial stability. We need to have rates that are set sufficient to cover our costs. We need to meet specific liquidity on hand and fund our principal payments. We also have identified as a priority successful expansion to Oceanside and Vista. So we want to make sure that we've accounted for outreach efforts that will result in an effective outreach and minimize opt-outs in those communities. We want to maximize our support of local businesses and local jobs in our procurement. And that's not just procurement of energy, but also our day-to-day business, where we print our notices, for example. And we want to support the Community Advisory Committee and their goals and their requests of the board. So what we're asking from the Community Advisory Committee is funds permitting, and we're not talking about dollars. We really want to seek input without restriction in terms of dollars, is what would the Community Advisory Committee like the board to consider as part of the budget and help to prioritize those requests. And we've talked I've heard a lot of good ideas in today's meeting, and maybe we can list those and put some type of priority around them. And also support of the subcommittee priorities. So vehicle electrification, for example, I've heard talk that sounds like, we need some sort of an inventory or map of what is our current EV charging infrastructure within our Clean Energy Alliance territory. Do we want to offer an EV charging management program to those customers with electric vehicles that would help to shift their charging of their electric vehicles to off-peak? I have seen that being offered by some of our partners in other areas. Do we want to consider a rebate program for EVs and not just vehicles, but bicycles, charters, et cetera? Are there any other ideas of things related to vehicle electrification that we may want the board to consider and prioritize, again, as funds are permitting. Under local programs, do we want to start looking at some types of energy efficiency programs? Supportive housing electrification. We've talked about in the past a feed-in tariff. A feed-in tariff is where we have a little larger scale local generating facility that maybe someone has a piece of property, it's too large for them for their own needs, but we would then have a contract with that property owner if they built a renewable energy facility that we would pay them so many cents per kilowatt hour based on our approved feed-in tariff. Disadvantaged communities, similar types of programs. Do we want to offer potentially energy efficiency program that's geared towards our disadvantaged communities? Ideas such as a solar rebate, reduced green impact, 100% renewable green impact enrollment at a reduced rate, hiring of grant writers. So those are just things that, you know, I've pulled from hearing discussions in other meetings, and then want to hear what other ideas you may have, and then maybe just help give some priority to some of these things, because we have a lot of good ideas. We have a lot we want to accomplish, and I do believe that there will be funds in the coming budget that the board can consider to put towards programs. And having some prioritization from the group would really be helpful in bringing forward a recommendation to the board. We will come back to this committee in June at the next meeting with more information about funding available and prioritization, and the board, the committee will be able to reprioritize if it decides it wants to rearrange, so that when the board gets the final budget at the end of June, it reflects the recommendation of the committee. So I think that.
All right. Thank you, Barbara. Yes.
Well, you know, what France did lately, they have required that all parking lots have solar installed over them if they have 50 or more parking spaces. Is there anything that we can do to take our parking lots that are in the city parking lots that we use? You know, Oceanside has so many right along the railroad tracks there, and use them to install solar?
I think we could try to encourage our member cities to look at that. We don't own any parking lots, so I don't think we could do it directly. But, and let me say this list, I mean, does anybody want to say just all of them? They're all good ideas, right? But I think the mission here is, it would really be great, even if we only have a little bit of money, to do something on the ground that we can actually show our communities we're actually doing something. So we're kind of looking for low hanging fruit, but yes, sir.
Just Barbara, list is very good. Under other, can we put like storage?
The other was a question to this group.
Yeah.
So if this group, if you want to see something related to battery storage, certainly.
All right, Paige.
Yeah, okay, we do have the participate energy one that would do solar and storage. So we've kind of addressed that issue. But I think being on two subcommittees, I'd like to hear from the rest of the committee about what they need from us, so that we can maybe synthesize the information that we're pulling together and help pinpoint what we want, you know, the budget to look like, or those programs to look like. Because I feel like we're getting information, but it's like, you know, whatever. Okay.
All right, who else has a thought? Yes.
So I just wanted to really push the feed-in tariff idea. I really agree with our speaker that the ideal situation is that we're generating all the power locally, and that our local business owners and residents are benefiting. It's like a mutually beneficial relationship, and we're producing clean energy. So I just feel like, this is just my personal opinion, but I think we're brainstorming, so hopefully that's okay. But I just feel like that's really meets the mission of what Clean Energy Alliance is here for. So I think that's a huge priority, and the grant writer, which I think everybody agrees is a high priority too.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, it's several questions. In terms of shifting EV charging to off-peak, if we're getting more and more of our energy from renewables, shouldn't we trying to get people to charge their cars during the day?
That's, you know, that's an old technology to charge off peak when you had idle renewable or fossil fuel plants. But with solar, you're better off to have everybody charge during the day.
Right.
The other thing is, I think in terms of helping people reduce their energy bills, the best thing you can do for them is provide solar on their roof, if they've got a roof. If they're a renter, maybe a solar that feeds into their complex. Because by providing solar, which is least cost energy source, you're eliminating all the delivery charges and things like that. And then if you're looking to reduce greenhouse gases, probably home electrification is one of the biggest things you can do other than electrifying vehicles, which is the biggest chunk of everything. But things like replacing gas water heaters with heat pump water heaters, that immediately reduces the greenhouse gases produced by that household by about 50%. So it's, you know, it's like one thing you can do that does a large chunk of it. So those would be some priorities I'd put on.
Good ideas. Yes.
I don't know, I guess I'd have to understand the issue better. But there's, you know, in San Diego, or even among the cities that are part of the CEA, there's quite a few customers that are on propane. And those customers would actually, the economics would be better for electrification. And I think there's more of a greenhouse gas reduction. So that'd be something to look into. I don't know if the numbers would pan out to make it big enough to be worthwhile, but it'd be something to look at.
Good idea. Propane conversion. Don.
No, I'm really would emphasize that hiring a grant writer would presumably pay for itself pretty quickly. So that's, I think it is a very important priority. Building electrification is going to be necessary. And I just want to emphasize that while the biggest bang for the buck is to replace your water heater, replacing your gas stovetop with an induction cooktop has enormous health benefits. There's been a lot of scientific reports in the last year of how dangerous gas stoves are for your health. And for one statistic that really sticks with me, childhood asthma is 5 times higher in homes that have gas stoves than homes that don't. So I think a lot of us are used to cooking with gas cooktops. We've eliminated ours, finally. But induction cooktops are much faster, much safer. And you get rid of those nasty gas fumes. And the vents don't clear the most dangerous fumes. When you turn on your gas cooktop, the first 30 seconds are when you really get the most exposure to methane. So building electrification would, and education about building electrification would be a top priority for me.
Yeah. Another good idea. I would translate that building electrification, and maybe we could look at a program where we could buy some induction stuff and provide it as loaners for people to try it out. And propane conversion was good. Yes, Paige.
There we go. Rick has his.
Okay, I'm sorry. Paige, did you want to, oh, you just wanted to flash your signs? Okay, Rick.
So I just want to echo the feed-in tariff that was mentioned. I think that plays in with multifamily, and I think it plays into what Member Daniels was talking about with the solar on the city's properties. The feed-in tariff program can work with help those other things be more successful.
Good idea. Let me ask, is this the same thing as what I call community solar?
Yeah.
I like the name community solar better. Feed-in tariff, nobody knows what the heck that is. All right, that one seems to be rising to the top. Other thoughts? Yes, Paige.
I just want this list that you have up there, Barbara, I just think we need to go through and analyze, are there existing programs out there that we don't need to that we can take advantage of and then eliminate them from the list of new things that we have to create? Am I making sense? So Anyway.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So we don't so while there might be programs out in the community, the question before us is, are there programs that we should maybe support by bringing our own resources towards to help, expand it even more? So for example, the home electrification or building electrification, what we may want to do it. And let me also clarify that based on the prioritization, we'll include, that in the budget, but bring it back to this group to kind of fine tune and figure out what we want to do. So for, home electrification, if the board allocates, some dollars towards it, we'll come back here and say, okay, so where do we think we should target those dollars to develop a program that the board approves and we put out in the community? So yes, there are probably many of those resources or programs that are being offered through other programs, but we may also want to support it as well to try and get it out even more. Electric bikes, for example, $1,000, maybe we want to add another 250, and maybe someone who may not have otherwise been able to buy it can now buy it.
Yeah, and I'm envisioning some CCAs, they just give an extra incentive beyond some state or federal programs, so that would be appropriate. And there was a lot of electrification stuff on the slide that Cody showed, so hopefully we can take advantage of that.
Other thoughts? Not, I'll throw mine out there. I would support as the two highest priorities, the grant writer and a community solar feed-in tariff project, and recommend to the board that we identify somewhere in our terrain and actually move forward with a small project and hook some people up as a demonstration. And the rest of these ideas are all great too, and the ones that people have mentioned, but as usual, our appetite exceeds our food supply, or whatever you want to say it, our money supply. Other thoughts? Barbara, do you need, yes, sir, go ahead.
I agree with that order too. The grant writer first, because that's where we're going to get all of our funds to help support all this. Just a comment too on what Roger Davenport said. You really want to charge your car during the daytime, right? We call it workplace charging, because that's when you're charging from the solar. You want to go home at night, and Tesla just started a program in Texas, and I know it's coming here, where you can bleed off vehicle to grid. You can use some of the energy in your battery, that 4 to 9, right? And then that'll help shave off your peak usage. And then on your super off peak at midnight, then you can charge it enough to go back to work. So that's the cycle that we really want to get everybody on.
Yeah, Barbara, is this enough, or would you like clearer direction from us? I'm not sure we can give it, but we could try if you want.
No, I think the direction was actually quite clear.
All right, great. Let's leave it there then. And let me see, is there anybody in the public that wanted to comment on this item? Priorities? Yes, ma'am. Come on back up.
Hi, I'm Sonia Robinson. I just really want to state that I'm really pleased and happy to hear the priorities that you guys are recommending to the board for feed-in tariff, community solar, as well as, of course, your grant writer that can benefit you all. And again, I'll be an agent of support with you guys and provide information as I can as well. Thank you.
Thank you for that offer, and we're quite likely to take you up on it. All right. Yes, sir.
Could we get your contact information somewhere? Just give it to somebody on the business.
Yeah, if you would give it to one of the, to Barbara, please. All right, then we're moving along, and my target is to get.
So there's a little more to this item.
Oh, all right, sorry.
Chair. So in addition to the board setting their priorities, we also had a discussion about starting recruitment for a new chief executive officer. The Clean Energy Alliance has grown to the point where it really needs the support of a local full-time CEO. And so the board did appoint a subcommittee to begin that process with the assistance of our general counsel and myself. I'm not running away. This was a very difficult decision for myself, and I will ensure a very smooth transition. But you'll be in good hands.
All right, thank you. And I'm going to invite anybody who wants to make a comment, but I'm going to make my own first. I think I'm one of the few remaining pieces of original equipment that goes all the way back to Barbara and I and our then general counsel sat down and were crafting the original joint powers agreement and wondering whether this little ship was going to float or going to sink. And in my 40 years in local government practice, I've worked with dozens of city managers, and Barbara is among the very best of the best. She's responsive, she's knowledgeable, she loves what she does, and she's really good at it. She's geographically challenged in that she lives in Santa Clarita. And believe me, we tried to twist her arm. Well, if we go out for an RFP, are you going to apply? And she can speak for herself, but I think the answer is no. But she has reassured me that there are quality people in the San Diego region, and she feels pretty good that we're going to be able to recruit somebody good as a replacement, although it's hard to imagine somebody as good as Barbara, but we can always hope. And she has committed she will stay with us, and the board asked her to stay involved in the recruitment process. And as I told Barbara when she first told me about this, I said, oh my gosh, mommy's leaving. The kids are going to burn the house down, which is kind of how I felt. But so thank you, Barbara, for all you've done for us, and you're not gone yet. So that's good. Anybody else want to make a
Yeah,
comment?
I
Don.
wanted to thank Barbara for the effort. When City of Del Mar adopted our climate action plan, our first priority was to get a CCA off the ground, and Barbara had already started working with Solana Beach. It was for Solana, what was it called? Solana Energy Authority.
Energy Alliance.
ASC. Anyway, and so she was involved in those very first meetings that led to the CA formation. And it has had a remarkable effect on a small city reaching one of their main climate action goals. We're struggling with transportation. We do have a lot of EVs, a lot more than we did in 2016. But I'm so pleased that we got to this point, and you've been instrumental in getting here. And I appreciate your willingness to help us with this transition period. So thank you very much, Barbara.
Anybody else? The let's embarrass Barbara moments? Yes, Rick.
Yeah, so creating this organization was a really scary thing. You know, joining this organization is a really scary thing. And Barbara has just done a wonderful job making sure that it's not scary at all. You give everybody complete confidence in the organization. And I hope we get a new CEO, you'll still hang around. Thank you.
Maybe one of our programs we should add to the list is housing for the CEO. Deborah, did you want to say something?
You took my thunder. I was gonna say we need a grant for housing for our CEO to stay. I just want to thank you on behalf of the city of Solana Beach, because I've been a long-term resident of that city, and the initial work that you were part of that brought that Energy Alliance to our city and changed the way we looked at energy usage and our city climate action goals was really a part of your leadership at that point. So I really want to appreciate it. You'll be missed. I have worked with, similar to probably everybody in the room, multiple CEOs, multiple superintendents, multiple, and you just have that magic combination of being very approachable, being very intelligent, being clearly a leader, and very resourceful, but just a really wonderful person to be part of, you know, and to lead this organization. So just want to thank you on behalf of my role here, but also my role as a citizen of the city of Solana Beach.
Thank you, Deborah. Let's give Barbara just a thank you. It's not often you get to launch a new entity, and it's like one of your children. We're going to go off into the world and do good, I hope. All right, we have one more substantive item on our agenda, although I guess I should ask, is there anybody else in the public that wanted to comment on this? The remaining item is Brown Act. I assume that's you, Elizabeth?
And my goal is to be done with this in about 20 minutes. And I know we have a large range of people regarding their familiarity with the Brown Act. By the way, I'm Elizabeth Mitchell. It's nice to see you all in person. I'm the Assistant General Counsel for Clean Energy Alliance, and I'm happy to be with you all today. So please indulge me if at sometimes this is over your head, or if it's sometimes this is so basic that you're like, I've heard this a million times, because we have the full spectrum of people today. So my general goal is to just have you all remember and remind you of when to ask a question. So it's not to memorize all this, it's just to know when you need to ask a question and reach out to me or Johanna Canlis, who's the general counsel. And I'm also going to hit the highlights of what's new in 2023. So you should have all filed a Form 700s. Nod your head. Yes, I did. Okay. You need to also file it when you leave office and amend it if you've made any changes. There are penalties if you don't. There's resources. Oh, and you're also going to have this slide deck afterwards, which is why I'm not reading it to you. I'm just hitting the highlights. And raise your hand if you want me to go slower at any time. But there's some online resources. You can also ask anonymously if you feel like you don't want to be chastised by me and what you did. Conflicts of interest are covered by the Political Reform Act, and they generally say that you can't have a material financial interest in the decisions that come before the body. So think if you owned an interest in an EV charging station, right? You're probably not going to be able to serve on this committee because you'd be financially interested in almost anything that's discussed, right? But there are 5 main categories of conflicts of interest that are identified. So one is your sources of income. So who you work for that pays you, or if you're a consultant, it's anything over $500 in the last 12 months. Gifts that you've received from people, which you've reported on your Form 700 dutifully, and any business entity that you're involved in. So this is a business entity. There are separate rules with respect to nonprofits that could be analyzed separately. Investments in entities over $2,000 and real property. So real property that you own or lease. I wanted to go over really quickly. I don't know if any of you besides Chair Warden hold elective offices as council members. There were some new laws with respect to the Levine Act. I don't think they're going to apply to you, but just you're in a campaign situation, there's some more rules that apply. Also unlikely to come up in this group unless we're talking about having a partnership. We don't own any land as CEA, but if we're in a partnership with one of our member agencies and we're talking about entering into a partnership to put an EV station somewhere, and that EV station is located next to your home, you might have to conflict yourself out. So there are different rules with respect to where your property is located. There's 3 concentric circles, 500 feet away, 1,000 feet away, and then greater than that. So just remember there's different rules for that. If something's closer than 1,000 feet and it involves something that we're doing, you're going to have to look into it more deeply. Also just want to mention, just because every single conflict of interest rule has like the detail and the detail and the detail, and it's all different. I'm just highlighting that it's different if you own property versus lease it. Just mention that because there's a different rule for everything. You don't need to know what it is unless it applies to you. So if you do have a conflict of interest, you have to disclose it and recuse yourself from participating. So to use the example of an EV charging station that's going to be located with a partner city within 500 feet of your house, that's going to presumptively disqualify you. So the procedure is you disclose it before the matter. I own property within 500 feet, and therefore I'm recusing myself. And best practice is to leave the room. But if you sit and you don't participate, that's fine. Just don't sigh or smile, because that's participation. The safe area is just to leave, but you're not required to. Another one of the requirements that you heard me mention today, and is one that I will tend to harp on when you guys get a little bit outside. I'm not going to let you actually violate the Brown Act, but I'm going to kind of say you're getting close to the line. is the Brown Act, and that's a law in the state of California that's designed to be kind of a sunshine law so that everything that happens in our local governments happens in front of the public. And there's lots of different rules that relate to that. So you have to figure out when it applies. It applies to a meeting of a majority of the members of the body. There's exceptions to every one of these bullet points, which is why I wrote it in bullet point form instead of having it be the run-on sentence that it actually is in the law. So we'll go over some of the exceptions later, and it has to do with anything that's within the subject matter jurisdiction of the body. So I have a question for you. When your subcommittees meet, is that a meeting under the Brown Act? See some no's. Anybody want to tell me why?
It's less than a quorum.
That's correct. It's less than a quorum, and it also has a short period of time. It's not like it's a standing committee. So some things that are not so going back to what is a meeting over another. So we tend to, in this group, have to really watch what the quorum is for our subcommittees. That comes up a lot, and that's for the Brown Act. So we can't have more than a quorum of this body sitting on any given subcommittee, because then we trigger the Brown Act requirements. That's not a bad thing. It just means that if they're triggered, we have to have a public meeting. It has an agenda. It's open to the public. That's noticed with 72 hours in advance. So it just triggers a lot of procedural requirements, which tend to get in the way of subcommittee work being done quickly and efficiently. So the decision was to keep it at less than a quorum so we could get that done and then come back to the larger committee to meet in public to have any decision. And that's also why you've heard there was a discussion today about whether something should be agendized so you can make a decision. That's a requirement of the Brown Act. Okay, some exceptions. So if any of you call Barbara, one-on-one contacts with Barbara are not going to be covered under the Brown Act. If you're at a social gathering, it's not about the subject matter jurisdiction of this agency. So all of you could attend, but you all don't want to look like you're talking about, clean energy, right? Some violations, if you call a meeting that's informal, it doesn't matter, still has to be noticed. There's two main types of serial meetings that are daisy chain and hub and spoke meetings that are not technically in the same time and place, but are still meetings. So that would be if, you imagine a daisy chain or the old telephone game where one of you calls another person and tells them what they think the priorities should be for the budget. And then you tell another person, and as soon as you get to a majority of the members of the body saying how you feel about something that you're going to make a recommendation on, that would be a violation of the Brown Act, and that's called a serial meeting. So in other words, it's a bunch of little small meetings that add up to a quorum. The other example is about a hub and a spoke. And that would be, say, there's a member of the community who is really interested in getting involved and comes and speaks to one of the members and says, I want you to make this a priority. And then you say, I will make it a priority. And then the member of the community goes and solicits that same conversation between another member. So now you have two. Oh, well, this member says that that's a priority. You should make it a priority too. And then all of a sudden you end up having consensus being built outside the meeting. So the idea is keep it under a quorum. And you also have to be really careful because it gets out of your hands, right? You only control what you say to other people. You can't control what other people pass along, right? So the advice that I would give you here is, subcommittees are really set up in terms of subject matter jurisdiction of what you're talking about. So don't talk to someone not on your subcommittee about that unless you're in this meeting. and we're not going to talk about non-agendized items. There's an exception to the majority rule that I told you. It has to be a majority of the, a quorum before you violate the Brown Act. The legislature passed some exception to that, and that happened a couple years ago. So the bottom line is, in social media, you only get one bite at the apple. So if one of you posts something, no one else can respond, even though we have what do we have, 13 members currently? I think it's 13. Even though under ordinary circumstances, you would need 7, 8 to make a majority. Even if one of you responds to one other, that's going to be a violation. So just keep in mind, social media, there's a lot that's within the subject matter of the agency. So just don't respond. And I would also say, if you're really interested in being active on social media, one of the things I advise is to designate a person for each platform. For example, you have some person say, I'm going to do the communications on Twitter. Someone else say, I'm going to do it on Facebook. I don't know how active you are on social media, but it's an important thing to know. It's also my favorite law currently because it has written into the law that an emoji equals a discussion. So, which also makes it very clear, and it makes sense, right? If somebody posts something on Facebook and likes it, it means that you approve of it. It is a communication. So just keep in mind that forwarding things, liking them, hearting them, all of that is going to get you in trouble if it's a direct response to another member of the agency. I just want to note there have been some changes to teleconferencing rules under the Brown Act. We met during the pandemic remotely. There's some in the pike that we may be able to meet remotely again. There's also exceptions for individuals who get sick. We're experimenting with that on a technological basis. I'm not going to go into the details because we're running over time. I just want to let you know that if you're sick and you still want to participate, we might be able to do that. Also, if you go on vacation and you want to participate remotely and publish where your address is to allow a member of the public to show up at the Hilton Head, to be in the meeting with you, you could also do that. So there are options. So the thing to put in the back of your mind is I might be able to participate. Reach out to us if you think you want to explore those rules for participating remotely on an individual basis. And I will let you know if the law passes to allow us to meet remotely together. There's lots of slides about what the requirements are. So violations of the Brown Act are very serious. They not only have fines, but there's criminal penalties. So you want to be very careful about your communications. One thing that I'm remembering now, there's Google Docs that you all share in your subcommittees. So only your subcommittee should have access to your Google Doc because we're limiting the number of people so we don't get a Brown Act violation. If you have another member of the subcommittee who's editing a Google Doc, now all of a sudden you're outside the meeting. I don't think we're going to have any real due process or ex parte contact issues. I just want to mention that the Public Records Act applies to this organization. And if you're not aware, that's another one of the sunshine laws in California that says the records of any public agency have to be disclosed to a person from the public who asks for them. So just to be aware, any emails, for example, that you might have with anyone that relate to the subject matter jurisdiction of this agency and that you're doing in furtherance of your position as a member on this body could be requested and would have to be disclosed to the public. Not that you would say anything that you didn't want to see on the front page of the newspaper, but that's the point, is that it seems like it's, we all kind of have a sense that if we're texting someone, it's private. Well, that's not the case when you're working in government. This doesn't take the place of your requirement to do AB 1, 2, 3, 4 training 2 hours every 2 years. So you have options for complying with that. I'm actually giving a 2-hour presentation that would meet your ethics training requirements if you need to get it done in San Clemente on the 24th from 3 to 5 p.m. So you can contact me if you want to go in person and hear me do this for 2 hours. Or you could go on the website at FPPC. I just want to warn you though, if you do it online, it has to be 2 hours. So wait till 2 hours and 1 minute before you click done. Otherwise it will send you to the beginning to redo. So you can save and continue, but you can't click done. And that's it.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Questions, Deborah?
When is I thought the AB, I forgot the number, the ethics
You'll have the
training.
Slides.
Ethics training doesn't go into effect for an agency like this until 2024. Is it up now? I know for our school board group, it's coming, but we don't have it yet. So I'm wondering does it apply differently to this group?
I don't know
Okay.
about school boards.
Okay.
Other questions? Yes, Paige.
Does this mean we can't, obviously, you said no sharing of subcommittee documents, but if there's information we'd like the whole committee to see, can we send it to Barb and then she can disseminate it?
Absolutely
Okay.
send it to Barb, because she will also be able to decide then, and navigate whether there's going to be any Brown Act issues.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else? If not, a couple of questions I'd like you to comment on. One, most of us are used to doing this in our cities, but we're 6 cities. So the terrain that we have to deal with is all 6 cities, right?
That's correct.
And the second thing is, how do we deal with interests of spouses and children?
So generally, just think if it's my spouse or my dependent child living with me, that's me. Generally speaking, there are exceptions.
All right. Anything else on the Brown Act? This we could talk about all day long and get a giant headache, but Elizabeth, you did a wonderful job of explaining it. Yes, Deborah.
So I was curious of the Q&A in a public comment and whether is that different because we're a committee and not a council that we do Q&A back and forth with a public speaker? Because normally questions go forward and then they go to staff or is that formality applied to this committee?
There's a few different things that go on with public comment. One, there's what the law is. 2, there's best practice. And 3, it's what the agency wants to do, right? So generally speaking, the advice is when you have public comment, you receive it and say thank you and don't respond just because that's like the green area. Like you're never going to violate the law. The meeting's never going to get off the rails if you just do it that way. But in the situation and if it's general public comment also, like not under an agenda item, it's within the subject matter jurisdiction, but not related to an agenda item. There's only so much that can be done. The exceptions to the Brown Act are that you can make a brief statement in response. And the question is, as soon as you start making any statement, is that brief? So my advice generally is if it's general public comment, stay in the green. However, a lot of especially elected officials have a need to balance being responsive to the community and saying nothing, right? So a brief response is not illegal. And in the case of an agendized item, talking to the public is fine. It's within the agenda, but it does raise the issue of if you have, at the point where you have 50 people in the room who want to make comments, you have to give them all the same opportunity. So you can't play favorites. If you start, having a back and forth with one, then you might have to have a back and forth with all of them. So it's kind of a slippery slope type thing. So a lot of organizations have sort of have rules to kind of keep the meeting in order that don't really match the legal requirement and are more like good practice but its procedures are within the body's general.
All right. Thank you again, Elizabeth. That was very helpful. And the reason Elizabeth is here at our meetings is to help us through these. So if you forget something or don't feel badly if she corrects us, which she does me occasionally, and I appreciate it. And if there's,
That's also, thank you, Chair Warden. If I interrupt you, it is because we can fix it right then.
yes,
And so it's not, I would never, if it's not fixable, I'm not going to say anything. I'll talk later.
okay. Hopefully we don't do too many of those. And I would recommend to all of you, the one key takeaway is if something comes up and you're not sure, call Barbara. If need be, she'll get an answer from legal counsel for you. And there are no stupid questions on this topic because the penalties are severe. All right, Barbara, did you want to say anything on this?
No.
All right.
think she did a great
Anybody
job.
in the
Thank you.
public that wanted to comment on the Brown Act presentation? I'm not seeing anything. Then I think the remaining item is adjournment, and our next meeting is June 1 in this chamber right here. So thank you all for coming. This was a very productive meeting, and we'll see you in June.